stuff is the way we talk
Yeah.
about
I
As Dan Crew was saying, half the humor is just like the chatter that goes into what we're going to talk about. So we're recording. We're going to
it.
I hit live, and we're on. We're going to do our second of hopefully many in this series. But we had some back channel conversations about a topic we think is really relevant in today's market, just around hiring and staffing for a cloud go to market role with all this motion around partnerships with hyperscalers and marketplace. So Amin, you're the one that sort of teed it up for us, and it was an excellent topic. So I'm going to start with you and just say, hey, so what are your thoughts on like the hire staff for this position to manage the hyperscaler partnerships and around cloud marketplace, manage the execution of marketplace stuff? I don't know. What are your thoughts, and how come this popped to your top of your mind?
I think the answer is like yes, 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 and yes. Like you have to do it across the whole gamut, right? But I think that when you think about it, I think a lot of it comes into the maturity of the organization and the maturity of the executive team, right? I think, we talked about this before, where we were talking about, hey, depending on where you are with your alignment with what executives want and what they're looking for in the strategic alliances role, or what they want or they think they want with an AWS or a Microsoft or a Google, it's going to dictate, it's going to really dictate who you hire. Because, and let me back up, because what a lot of times happens is if you have a younger executive staff, right, that has no experience with this, and that's no cut on them, the fact of the matter is you don't know what you don't know. And you can't take someone who's just like a CRO or VP of sales and say, hey, guess what? In your free hours, you're also going to run alliances, and you're also going to create a marketplace listing, and you're also going to align that to your go to market. Like, just saying it ain't going to happen, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I even say, yeah, the head of sales, but I mean, even a 20-year, 15-year, 10-year, 5-year vet of alliances, traditional, say, yeah, now you're just going to extend that into this marketplace thing. So just go do that. And the challenge I think everybody has when starting this journey is they say, okay, AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft, whomever. All right, so I'm gonna take on this responsibility. What should I do? Oh, it's super easy. Just go do these integrations here, and then, oh, by the way, this co-sell thing over here. You just start sending stuff over there, and you get these little APIs you can just connect from your CM. Super simple. And as we all know, it's like, so even an alliance veteran, I think, is challenged in my experience with starting this off. So
Yeah.
I hear you.
My whole thing, and I was saying this when we were talking the backside of it a little bit, is just because it's real life here at Tackle. Like we've had a lot of different alliance people come in. We've had a lot of different folks as we've kind of trimmed and kind of reorganized, and we're bringing in a new leader now. But like, we've thought about two different things. One is like, by bringing in outside help, by bringing in you can be much more surgical with how you like apply their role, right? And otherwise a lot of times alliance people can get thrown into, go create some pipeline, go get an SCA done with AWS, go do all this stuff, and then it just becomes this big kind of clumsy motion where you're trying to do a million things, and then it's like, what is actually being measured out of it. And so what we've kind of been able to do is we brought in a couple folks and been much more specific about exactly what the person's going to do. And we're talking about bringing in, somebody to do specifically GCP biz dev, where it's like, go run the ground game just for GCP. We're going to pay you X amount of dollars a month, and you're going to go do that. And then we're going to measure you just on that. We're not saying go do everything with GCP in the entire market, So we're kind of like, there's programs, there's biz dev, and there's people. And so as a company, when we're all under these financial constraints like we are, you can be way more, like I said before, like surgical and like with a scalpel of like, I want you to do this exact bit. I'm going to measure you on that exact bit. So I see more and more opportunities for fractional work up and down the alliance side. I think just hiring an alliance manager is at some level you can do it, but like, you've got to have a big enough motion going where it's like a real full-time 40-hour a week job.
Yeah, I think that is also, I'm biased because that's kind of what I'm doing, but I think, one of the challenges outside, like I like that role you just described because it's surgical, it's very specific, and it's outcome based with clear things. Like, you got to go generate leads, and the more leads you get, the more you benefit and we benefit. Think about it from a program perspective and being in the market. it's hard to demonstrate the value, particularly around this cloud go-to-market, where if it's a new company and it's not one of the big ones we hear about in the press, the CrowdStrike and the Wiz and this, that, and the other, it's like, okay, well, what's the return on me renting you in this strategic role, building a program with a hyperscaler? What are you going to deliver? What am I going to deliver for that customer? It's hard to prove the value of that fractional resource in some cases, but I really like the way you think about it, because the more you can be outcome based with any fractional resource, the better off I think it is for
I
most
actually
markets.
think it was, well, at least the proposal we were looking at actually had it be an outcome-based payment, which I thought was really fascinating. And that was the first time I had heard of that, especially on the biz dev side. It's almost like a hired gun. It's like, hey, you're going to pay me a little bit of money to get me in and I'm going to do some work. But really, the real money I'm going to make is when I can give you like an S2 or an S3 lead, which is a warm intro from a cloud provider that that now you can kind of chase down. And that's how I get paid, because that's what we're actually looking for. And then that has a higher conversion rate into ARR, right?
But here's the thing too, that I think that you didn't do this intentionally, but I'm really curious about.
Yeah.
Is like, how did you get there? Because your thought process is very refined. And I suppose that as you built out this very refined thought process of this is what we need and what we want, and this very surgical approach, you got there because you made some mistakes and you had some warnings, and then you're like, oh yeah, that
totally good point. Yeah, like that didn't really work. We don't need to hire that person for that amount of money just to go take people to dinner and go do things. Like, nope. We got to do other stuff, right? Yeah. Even as we're like, we're in the final phases of hiring a VP of partners and alliances here at Tackle, and we've revisited the thought. It's been a long process, 3 or 4 months now, and it's been a long process, and we've revisited what that person's going to do over the course of 4 months. Like, we've really changed, gone from like, standard cloud stuff and this, that, to much more of a defined, like, okay, what are you going to do? Where's the operational rigor? Like, how are we going to measure it? Like, why don't we attach this to the revenue system a little closer, right? Those are the things. And then that becomes the big split, like I was saying before. There really is, I think everybody should think about it. There is like programs, and then there's like biz dev. And that, and it all kind of fits under the go-to-market system. But programs is, like trying to keep up with all the things that are happening at the clouds, or even in certain big ecosystems like Salesforce and Databricks and things. What's going on over there? We're trying to sign strategic agreements. We're trying to run incentives and exploit those, and I feel like it's the program side goes and creates the program, and then the biz dev side goes and exploits that. So like at Tackle, we're trying to create an SCA, which is going to be, saying we're going to do this many things. We're going to do this many deals. We're going to, have this much of an uplift. But then I want to give that to a biz dev person and go say, you're going to go run that, and you're going to go exploit that program and essentially utilize the entire funding out of that program to grow.
And right? You nailed it. And I think that's the piece where I think that as you come into it, that alliance person, head of partnerships, whatever, I'll use all these terms and kind of like munge them together, right? They mean different things, different places, right? I think is part of it is that part of that role is to protect the organization from itself. Because, executives, they all sit in rooms together, they all talk, they're all peers of each other. And then executive A will say, hey, you know what, SCA, and what is it? He's like, oh, are we doing SCA? Well, we better get one of those SCAs too. Yeah. And then that's another thing that goes on the plate of, your alliances, what have you. And you might not even be ready for, an SCA, but you are maybe ready to like start really ramping up your co-sell using like incentives like MPOP or whatever. You have to demonstrate that level of proficiency, and it's those little pieces that kind of step up and say, oh, well, have you achieved any of your competencies? No, I haven't. Okay, well, so you can't even have a conversation.
Yeah. So it's almost like a governor on all of the many different things, all the many shiny objects that an organization can pursue. And it seems like every sort of conversation that someone has with a cloud provider, there's a different shiny thing that looks attractive. So you have this role as a gatekeeper that says, just hold on, slow down. We need to build some foundations like the co-sell you're saying, before we sort of jump in and do this. And I think one of the other challenges as well is like, I mean, the cloud providers, particularly around this, changes. It's like everybody announces their annual priorities for the year, right? We're coming up. We just have Microsoft
Yeah.
year, or coming up on Microsoft year end, and so we got the playbooks coming
I mean,
in.
hell,
Priorities.
Amazon's calendar, and we still don't know the exact plans on how they're getting comped.
Right.
Like, it's
And
kind of
then they
ridiculous
and then they
sometimes. 4
change
months later.
midstream, and they change midstream, and then there's a skunkworks operation that gets funded organizationally that's a pilot. So then there's that. So you have like these playbooks that are shifting and evolving throughout the year, not just resetting annually. So it is something that I think, to your point, Amin, about Denker's refined thought around what works, and it's more of a strategic approach, is the broad brush. You have to go through it, right? You really have to go through it to recognize the value of something like this, and you companies just have to sometimes learn the hard way in order to see the value of the right way.
You have to learning is painful, it's uncomfortable, and you have to go through it. And I think a piece of that too is understanding the connection points to those hyperscalers. If like, how does this affect your channel strategy? A perfect example of this, when you were talking about change, was it last year? Was it January 15th, January 14th? I don't know. Let's say like this really scary day that Google went through and then bundled in Gemini, right? And blew up pipeline for the entire channel overnight, right? Now, we can debate whether like the efficacy of it and did it, has it panned out how they wanted to. That's a whole different story. But the point of it is that it is the point that both of you have made of, hey, you know what, there's a huge amount of change. And regardless of how you plan to execute your alliance strategy in concert with your channel strategy, there are a lot of things that are outside of your control that are going to materially impact your ability to execute. And if you have your head of alliances going down this path of, nope, it's a mandate, gotta get the SCA, and not providing the room to maneuver to address these changes, these macroeconomic changes in the market, that you have, there has to be a relief valve somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's changing. It is changing so fast, dude. It is true. I mean, the programs and it's always tricky when you're in this world where we're trying to align with the clouds and cloud marketplaces. Like, you're always trying to stay ahead of where they're going. They're always changing a plan. They're releasing stuff. Sometimes you find out, sometimes you don't. Sometimes we find out from customers, which is crazy. It's like, God, all the work we still try and do to align with them.
Right.
It's tricky. But our job, our job relies on being tied together with them, right? Like, we work with them. It's like a three-legged stool. It's us and the customer, us and the end customer, and then the hyperscaler, right? So
you mean you just don't go to the documentation repositories to find out what you need to know? You just synthesize the 1,000 pages using some ChatGPT agent, and no, it's hard because also you have these massive silos to contend with when you're in there. So I think going back to just the question of if I'm entering this cloud go-to-market space, and I would almost say it's of course it's a little different if you're a startup and you just have had a direct channel, and channels in general are new. I think they would be more open, like that persona is more open to saying, no, I got to rent some expertise because this is foreign. But I've had experience on the other end of the spectrum with those traditional alliance teams, where there's a team dedicated to each cloud in just a normal course, and then cloud market comes in, and that's where I've seen you have to run some cycles before you realize that, wow, this is bigger than a breadbasket, right? I should really hire that. So it's really that thinking about what's required across a spectrum, look at your internal resourcing, and then make some decision of like, look at, we build that expertise internally across each of these requirement sets, or we just go find somebody. But I don't think people generally think about it that way, particularly on the larger side of the enterprise.
Yep. And the other piece I'll throw in is that what we're seeing at Tackle is like we have a pretty robust managed services bit that manages co-sell, for instance, right? And we're doing different kind of coaching things, but people are starting to say like, oh, okay, I could go hire 2 people and manage them long term, or I could just for half the price of an actual human, I could go just bring in a managed service and they can kind of do all this work. So that then what I can go do is I can go hire a couple sellers specifically around actually driving that business, right? And not doing some of the other work. So we're seeing more and more of uptick that too. I think it's just like anything, like shit, 10 years ago, SaaS came about because people didn't want to manage their own upgrades, their own hardware, right? It's like at some level, you want to keep your core people that are really understand your business, that are really required to the business, and then you can outsource a lot of this other stuff and go outsource the bits that aren't pieces of your core business, but need to get done,
I would argue too, like not argue, but I would add to that too, is that in the maturity of the business, what you're expecting from that position, if you are, let's say, you're in a primarily PLG motion versus moving into an SLG motion, or in that transition of moving to an SLG motion, what you're asking from your cloud providers is going to be different. And it's going to be different depending on how much infrastructure and how much of your solution you've actually invested in that cloud provider, because there's going to be a ceiling for what they're going to allow you to do and how they're going to lean in. If you have no infrastructure on cloud provider X and you're like, you're part of our go-to-market, no, you're not.
Right.
Whatsoever.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the business evolves at AWS, for instance. Released earlier this year, like, come on, everybody, come on in. If you're not built here, great, come on and list their AWS marketplace. And then you peel that back, and what does it really mean? It means, okay, well, those listings will really get zero resources from, the AWS to help drive anything, simply because there's no outcome. So I think it's an interesting decision that was made, and I'm really curious just to see what happens as this market evolves with those listings that come in that don't have that coveted badge, and see how they actually perform. Because I can see use cases, but I think the use cases are customer driven, and the expectation, I'm assuming, is going to be really low. Like, as a company, I'm built over here, but I'm going to list and transact in AWS marketplace because that's what my customers want. And I'm really not looking for assistance from AWS beyond some minor support or enablement or self-service capability.
Yeah. That could be the chat of a whole nother talk, honestly, is that whole idea of like, how much does EDP burn down, and what is the multi-cloud strategy, and how does that map across, right? I mean, that is a whole nother can of worms to kind of get into for sure. And they all work different. The programs are all different, and aligning that stuff is tricky. But
all this is super interesting too, when you look at, who your ICP is. You may have the majority of your infrastructure at Google or at AWS, but I guarantee you that regardless of what everyone wants to call it, your customers have a multi-cloud strategy, especially if you're thinking about collaboration and infrastructure. Like, it's perfectly normal that they're going to have infrastructure in one location and their collaboration and productivity in another location. And then add on that, M&As. Like,
right.
You're going to do business, you're going to grow. Like, guess what? You have a multi-cloud strategy, period.
Right. Yeah, everybody. I mean, everybody who's in the Fortune 500 does, right? You have to, right? And I mean, as soon as you get any sort of scale, you have to, for sure.
There's no way around it. There's no way around it whatsoever. And I think that's the piece that starts getting really, I call that, I know this is a little bit tangential, but I think it's important. It's like, that's like the 3-dimensional selling, that when you start rolling in other groups into your co-sell, like sales enablement, like, seller on your enterprise sellers on your team, that you have to institutionalize them with, this is what the market looks like. And it rolls back up into who you hire for this role. Because if they're not seasoned and they don't necessarily get it and can't have this conversation and can't translate that conversation to sales, can't translate that conversation to sales enablement, can't translate it in a way that it's going to affect your AEs or your AMs, and then build that program around it, but also be able to coach into it.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's another entire session that we could talk about, because it's multifaceted. There's a lot of levers you can pull, and but it's absolutely mandatory, and it starts at the top. Like, when I think about working with a customer, I have the leadership team is very important to being aligned about this mission around cloud go-to-market and the outcomes that they expect to receive and the investment they expect to make. But not all SLT has equal vote to me. The CRO, the head of revenue, is the one that matters. And if that head of revenue is not online and dialed in on this, which would mean supporting this effective enablement program you mentioned, then it's like, whew, it'll be a slug. There's gonna be friction, right?
As a quick aside, what I heard you say brought me back to my famous Animal Farm reference. All animals are created equal, except some are created more equal than others. Remember that, like the pig. What was that? I forgot Napoleon the pig. He said that. You're Napoleon the pig.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, right. More equal than other.
Yep. I like it. I'm gonna have to use that. Maybe not in a sales analogy, but I'll come up with something. That's a good one. I haven't heard that one.
I mean, I butchered that completely, but for some reason I feel like that's like it's an Animal Farm quote in this.
Yeah. And no offense to the channel leaders, because I, as a longtime channel person, I actually really like the position of an alliance leader. I firmly believe in this notion of like ecosystem-led growth, which, look at those of us that have been around, it's like, I talked about ecosystems 20 years ago, but what's different now is everything, in my opinion, because of the role that the hyperscalers have inserted themselves into. So I think it actually is a really good time to be an alliances leader and play a role in directing clearly attributable opportunities into the funnel and watching those opportunities come down faster. Thinker, in your example, this individual is going to come in and it's already not only sales qualified, it's coming in at stage 3. I mean, right? That's going to collapse that sales cycle, and it's clearly attributable to that resource. So I think it's a really good time. But at the end of the day, the one that owns the number for the organization is generally, the CRO, unless you have like a CPO type role, which is emerging. So, man, these are fascinating times.
Yeah.
So I know we could riff on this for forever, but I know we're coming up on 20 or so minutes. It's like, hey, TED Talk time. We should probably think about wrapping it down. So we'll throw it to you guys. I don't know. We could. It's our thing. We can do whatever we can do whatever we want. But
I just like to bring up. We chat about a few topics for 10 or 15 minutes. I think, like Amin said, we should just always be recording, right?
I love it.
Always be recording our ideas. We'll snip a couple bits together.
So we're gonna keep doing this. The three of us have been chatted. We really like it. We have some ideas for taking this in a couple different directions once we get another couple cycles under our belt. Take it on the road, coming to a town near you.
Right.
I can't promise we're going to be the next all-in podcast, but we're going to have some fun, and hopefully, the handful of people who watch this are getting some value out of it. Thanks, Mom.
I guarantee you that we're gonna be like somewhere. We're gonna be doing it. Someone's gonna come up and be like, "One of us said something like 8 podcasts ago, right?" And you're like, "Did I say that?
Wait a minute."
Yeah, exactly. It's like
that. Oh, that helped. Good, right? I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Right, this is good. This is good stuff. I got to get back to my Friday, but gentlemen, always good to just shoot the shit with you. This is always fun. So good talking to you, and we'll do this again in another month. All right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cheers, guy. Have a good one.
Right on.
See ya. Cheers. See you later, man.